But now let's move on to some of the execution sites around Dorchester. These earthworks that I'm walking into now is known as the Maunbury Ring. It's actually originally a Neolithic henge. It dates back from 2,500 to 4,000 years before the birth of Christ. So that's what, 4,500 to 6,000 years ago. During the Roman occupation, it was used as an amphitheatre. And then during the Civil War, 1642, 1648, there was a parliamentary gun in here. It was a fort which defended the south side of Dorchester. But it's what happened here in the years after, especially in the year 1685, because this was a site of numerous executions. People were burnt at the stake here, and others were hung, drawn and quartered. The worst punishment that could be given down to anybody. And Judge Jeffreys, during the assizes of 1685, sentenced a lot of people to be hung, drawn and quartered. The events which became known as the Bloody Assizes came about from the Battle of Sedgemoor, which occurred on the 6th of July, 1685, just outside Bridgewater, about 35 miles northwest of here. This was the failed rebellion by James Scott, Duke of Monmouth, who tried to seize the throne from James II, and of course it failed. James Scott was the eldest illegitimate son of King Charles II, and he reckoned he had a claim to the English throne. But of course he didn't, because he was illegitimate. So he set about this rebellion. The rebellion failed, and all the men who had joined his rebellion and taken up arms against the king were all rounded up. And so was James Scott, and he was beheaded outside the Tower of London on the 15th of July that year. And that was the bloodiest execution in British history. In total, 292 people were sentenced to death here at the Assizes in Dorchester. Out of those, only 74 were executed, 175 were transported to the colonies, 9 were fined or whipped, and 54 were actually acquitted of all charges. Out of those 74, well, they were hung, drawn and quartered here, which means they were dragged to this place from the prison cells. Here they were hung by the neck until they started to choke. They were cut down. Their private parts were cut off in front and burnt in front of their face. They were disemboweled, and their bodies were cut into 4 pieces. And just before they drew their final breath, dying in agony, their head was severed. The worst punishment in British history. Steep banks which surround the site offered a good vantage point for all the executions that have occurred here over the years. But they didn't just happen in 1685, because years later this location was used for even more executions. And one that comes to mind is a lady called Mary Channing, who died here on the 21st of March 1706. Her execution was witnessed by over 10,000 people. She was notorious in the town. She was born Mary Brooks in 1687 to Richard and Elizabeth Brooks. She was a bit of a wayward child, And at age 17, she was married off early to a grocer called Thomas Channing. The wedding took place on the 15th of January, 1704. However, despite being married, she also kept a lover. Yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this story. So she set about murdering her husband, and she poisoned his milk. She was eventually found guilty at the assizes on the 28th of July, 1705, and sentenced to be burnt. But she couldn't be burnt straight away because she was pregnant. But who was the father? Was it her husband or was it her lover? Sadly, the history books don't tell us that, and they don't tell us what happened to her son either. At least I haven't been able to find that out. If you happen to know, I'd be quite interested in finding out. So just drop a comment below, please. Let me know. But she gave birth in prison to her son, and then a couple of months later, she was executed here in front of a large crowd. Just one of many people who have lost their life here at the Mournbury Ring. And standing in the middle of the ring today, it's so peaceful, it's so quiet, it's so tranquil. And this is used by locals for social events, dog walking. And it's a nice, quiet, green spot, green location to enjoy here in the town of Dorchester. But I wonder how many people who walk through here for social occasions actually remember all the events that have happened here throughout history and the amount of people who lost their life here.